Now, I know this is the video that everybody has been waiting for. We all know how I feel about the Elementalist, and the truth is you're not really wrong, but I will do my best to give you an unbiased, completely legitimate, non-satirical look at where the Elementalist currently lies in the current meta. A good majority of the DPS builds are simplified from their previous iterations. The healing builds are still highly viable, even if they have some problems. And overall, the Elementalist is in an okay spot if you don't mind having to play harder to get the same result as other classes. Without further ado, these are the best builds for the Elementalist in 2024. To start things off, we are going to cover the power DPS options for the Ellie, which takes the place of the power Tempest, the power Catalyst, and the power Weaver. The Power Tempest has recently joined my personal recommendation list due to the ease of play for this build. It revolves around using instant cast scepter skills, channeling your air overload, and that's about it. The key is to fully overload your air until it drops the lightning field on the ground, and then swap over to fire, use a couple skills, swap back, overload air, swap to water, use a couple skills, back to air. I did a standalone build video for this build, so if you have seen that video, nothing's changed. For gear, we are running full Berserker gear with Runes of the Scholar and Relic of the Firework. Your weapons are going to be Scepter Warhorn with Force and Accuracy, and for food you are going to run Chicken and Wine with Salsa and Superior Sharpening Stones. For traits, you are running Water 233, Air 332, and Tempest 311. Fresh Air is going to be the key trait that makes this build operate, and for utilities you're going to run Wash the Pain Away, Feel the Burn, Glyph of Storms, Signet of Fire, and Glyph of Elemental. Though, like in my other build guide, not running Rebound while playing Tempest basically means you're just griefing your team. This is one of the easiest builds to play even in a full meta sense. Just make sure you get your air overload timings down and use skills in between. And also use Glyph of Storms while in air attunement. The Power Catalyst runs full Berserker gear with Rune of the Dragon Hunter and Relic of Firework. It uses Spear with Force and Impact and Sous Vide Steak with Superior Sharpening Stones. The traits are Fire 131, Air 331, and Catalyst 212. Your utilities are Signet of Restoration, Glyph of Storms, Relentless Fire, Shattering Ice, and Fiery Greatsword. Shattering Ice is your flex slot if you want something else, which the Catalyst doesn't have a whole lot else to put there. This build is a real Ellie build where you're going to cycle through all four of your elements, which means that it is a big pain in the ass to play. But in short, in fire and air you are blowing your Jade Sphere, and in every other attunement you are using the etching into your other skills before blasting your big etch skill. It's not really all that challenging, but you need to move quickly through each of your skills before repeating the loop. Start in air, into fire, into earth, into water, and then back to air, and just keep going. For the Power DPS Weaver, there is no easy way for me to explain the Weaver without saying it is not as good as the previous available options, the builds that I already covered. The rotation is more convoluted and complex. This build requires full melee, has very little going for it in terms of defenses, and frankly relies on both mixed elements and fully attuning elements to do its damage. For gear, it runs full Berserker gear with Runes of the Scholar and Relic of the Firework. For weapons, it runs Sword Warhorn with Force and Impact and Sous Vide Steak and Superior Sharpening Stones. For traits, you are going to run Fire 131, Air 331, and Weaver 121, with your utilities being Signet of Restoration, Arcane Blast, Glyph of Storms, Primordial Stance, and Self-Weave. Like I said before, this build has a long-ass rotation that can't be adequately summarized, so just look it up if you're interested. It's not worth learning. Moving on to the Condi DPS options, there are two primary options for Condi DPS, which is the Condi Tempest and the Condi Weaver. The Condi DPS Tempest runs full Viper's gear with runes of the Trapper and Relic of the Fractal. Its weapons are Pistol Warhorn with Bursting and Malice Sigils using Veggie Flatbread and Master Tuning Crystals. For traits, you are going to run Fire 111, Earth 212, and Tempest 311, with primary utilities being Wash the Pain Away, Glyph of Elemental Power, Glyph of Storms, Signet of Fire, and Glyph of Elements. This build uses primarily overload skills in both fire and earth, and while it's not nearly as easy to play as the Power Fresh Air Tempest, this build does work and can be simplified using Scepter instead of Pistol. Like all Elementalist builds, there's no easy way to simplifying it without doing a dedicated video, and since we all know how I feel about Elementalists, I don't see that happening, at least on this channel. The other Condi DPS option is the Condi DPS Weaver. Condi DPS Weaver runs the exact same gear as the Condi DPS Tempest, and it runs mostly the same traits, excluding the Weaver trait line. So instead of Tempest, you are running Weaver 111. The rotation of the Weaver is complex and not worth it, as I mentioned before, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Moving on to the Boon DPS options for the Elementalists, there are two best in slot builds with the Power Alacrity Tempest and the Power Quickness Catalyst. The Power Alacrity Tempest utilizes the same gear as the Power DPS Tempest, with the main changes being to the trait lines. This build uses Arcane 113, Air 332, and Tempest 312, and it plays exactly the same. Since you are constantly overloading, you now just produce boons. This build is great to have as an alternative since it's pretty useful to fill roles and literally takes no extra work if you already know the Power DPS Tempest rotation. There's a reason I covered that build when it came out, and this is essentially just a modified version of that build. The Power Quickness Catalyst is a newcomer to available builds since the Catalyst recently got some buffs. I haven't seen any of these guys out in the wild, but it's fair to say that it actually seems like a pretty good build. This build runs full Berserkers with Runes of the Scholar, excluding an Assassin's Helm and an Assassin's Backpack. It uses Relic of the Firework with Spear and Force and Accuracy sigils. It does use Precision Infusion, so if you want to go ahead and swap gloves or boots to Assassins 2, that's fine, but you are shooting for 56% crit chance. For food, you are using Sous Vide Steak and Superior Sharpening Stones. The traits are Fire 131, Air 331, and Catalyst 233. Your primary utilities are Arcane Brilliance, Shattering Ice, Glyph of Storms, Relentless Fire, and Elemental Celerity. Like other builds that utilize Spear, this one is similar. Basically, you want to use your Jade Orb in every single element, cycle through and cast your Etch skill on Spear alongside its more powerful counterpart. It's fairly high APM, however, you start with Air, Fire, Earth, Water, following the same pattern and blowing your Jade Orb and then going into your Etch on Spear. It's pretty straightforward, but it is still a lot of buttons to press. Overall, I feel this build is mostly worth the effort because you do produce a lot of boons, which is good in comparison to a lot of the other boon support classes. Now, for what everybody is waiting for, the heal builds. Tempest has been relegated as the heal spec for Elementalists for a long time now, but with the changes made to Catalyst, it has opened up a heal Catalyst option. Now, I'm way more familiar with the heal temp as an enjoyer of healers, but for the most part, there are a handful of things to consider when evaluating a heal class if it is good or not. The ease of healing in boon application, the amount of CC or flexibility of CC, or if it has any special team buffs that can be used or exploited. But for now, let's talk about the heal Alacrity Tempest. Like all healers, we are rocking Harriers or Minstrels with Runes of the Monk and Relic of Caracosa. You run Dagger Warhorn with Sigil of Transference and Paralyzation with Bowl of Fruit Salad and Bountiful Maintenance Oil. Your traits are Arcane 311, Water 323, and Tempest 232, with your utilities being wide open. I personally recommend Wash the Pain Away and Rebound, while Eye of the Storm, Aftershock, and Glyph of Renewal will give you some utility and some on-demand defense, stability, and Aegis. Like the Alacrity Tempest, you are going to be cycling through your overloads to provide your boons. Overall, this build does lack CC in comparison to other healers, but it does have a good amount of healings and boon production. If you're willing to work for it, it does have the ability to negate mechanics with rebound and can generate auras for your team. Moving on to the new healer on the block, the Heal Quickness Catalyst. This build uses the same armor as the Heal Tempest, except it uses Staff with Transference and Paralyzation. The traits are Arcane 311, Water 323, and Catalyst 333, with your utility skills wide open as well. The utilities are less easy to pick since Catalyst and Core Ellie have kind of trash utilities. However, this build does seem way easier to use. You blast through all of your attunements using your Jade Spheres, you drop all of your Water Staff heal skills, and that's about it. Use the utilities depending on what you need, and that's it. Easy peasy. With that, this is the last of the 9 Ultimate 2024 guides. This class is my least played and least favorite, so if it's a bit shorter or less informative than the others, I apologize. We'll be doing a handful of Guild Wars 2 videos before the next patch drops, ranking all of these builds that I've covered, and I have some more non-Guild Wars 2 stuff coming up. With that, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to all of my subscribers, and if you dig the content, please consider subscribing. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.